call the special called workshop on Tuesday, November the 1st at 11 a.m. to order. Welcome. This is the November 1st special called workshop of the Greenville City Planning Commission. My name is Meg Terry, and I serve as the chairman of the commission. I am an architect and live in the North Main neighborhood of Greenville. And we will start with Lynn, our newest commission member. If you'll introduce yourself and name, neighborhood, and profession.
Lynn Soulsby. I'm with Blue Water Civil Design. I'm a civil engineer. I live behind the Harris Teeter on Augusta Road.
Derek Enderlin, I'm an attorney. I live in the Colonel Elias Earl Historic District.
I'm Diane Eldridge. I'm a retired conservation planner, and I live in the Parkins Mill area.
Jeff Randolph, real estate developer, live in West End.
We're volunteers appointed by City Council to serve on this board. Among its other duties, the Planning Commission makes recommendations to City Council on annexations and amendments to the zoning ordinance and map. The primary purpose of today's workshop is for the Planning Commission to receive an update on AX 11-2022, Z-10-2022, which is the annexation and rezoning ordinance for the Woven Plan development. We will first receive a presentation from city staff, who will provide an overview of the project history and where we are currently in the process. After that, the applicant will provide an update on his project. I would like to thank the members of the public for joining us today, both online and in person. Copies of the workshop agenda are available for our attendees. I would call your attention to the explanatory notes on the agenda. Today's workshop will not include a public hearing. There will be another public hearing for this item in front of the Planning Commission Tuesday, November the 29th, before it goes back to City Council. I believe that's planned for 4 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam
4
Chair.
p.m. Again, that's Tuesday, November the 29th at 4 p.m. Persons wishing to comment on the application are invited to do so at that time. Any changes to this date will be posted to the city's website. So everyone is aware the Planning Commission has not been involved with the Woven project since it was on our agenda back in July. City Council referred the project back to Planning Commission at its meeting last week. We are here to learn what this means and to receive updated information on the project. Commission members may ask questions or provide comments that are within the purview of the commission and the review standards for a planned development rezoning request. However, we will not deliberate towards any decisions today. The commission will not deliberate or provide a recommendation until after the public hearing in a few weeks. Staff may share more about the public hearing and path forward as a part of today's workshop. Please make sure your cell phones are in silent mode, and I would also ask that comments and side conversations be kept to a minimum so everyone can hear the presentation. Again, thank you for attending, and we'll do roll call.
McTerry,
Here.
Lynn Soulsby,
Here.
Derek Enderlin,
Here.
Mike Martinez is absent. Diane Eldridge,
Here.
Pam Adams is not present, and Jeff Randolph here. We do have a quorum.
Great. All right. I'll turn it over to you, Austin.
And I'll actually turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate everyone being here today. So how we're going to start this today is I was just going to kind of review us back from the beginning, talk about the plan development process, what went before you in July, what's taken place since July, and get y'all caught up to speed kind of on how this process has unfolded since you last had it before you at your July Planning Commission meeting. So with that, we are going to start with just an overview of the request. The application consists of 2 parts, which are being considered together. First is the annexation of 6 parcels and portions of right-of-way into the city limit. The second is the rezoning to a planned development for the 6 annexed parcels and 6 existing parcels in the city limits. All 12 parcels would be included in the Woven project. The total property is approximately 2.92 acres. The item was approved by first reading by City Council on August 22nd. Since then, the applicant conducted another neighborhood meeting held September 27th at the Truist Culinary and Hospitality Innovation Center. The applicant mailed invitation letters to owners and occupants within 1,000 feet of the project site for this neighborhood meeting. The item was then deferred until the 24th, October 24th City Council meeting. at which time City Council referred this matter back to Planning Commission for further study. Next slide, please, Austin. So before we go into the project details, we thought it might be helpful to take a look at the plan development requirements in our ordinance. A plan development, or PD, as we commonly refer to it, is a zoning classification that is tied to a specific project. So a developer might approach the city if it does not fit the current zoning district for their property, which is the case in this situation.
Shannon, quick note that Pam has joined us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Commissioner Adams. So, okay, if they qualify, they may request this plan development classification. PDs are intended to promote innovative planning and site design concepts. They are supposed to provide a higher level of design aesthetic and high-quality development. As you can see, staff summarized some of the standards for PDs on this slide. In a nutshell, the developer is able to request flexibility from the standard zoning requirements, including height, setbacks, and density. In exchange, they may offer additional open space, high-quality design, a mix of land uses, or other elements. I will note that in South Carolina, because we do not have inclusionary zoning, a plan development is one mechanism, but not the only one, but on one way that the city is able to achieve affordable housing in a project. The affordability component is considered a unique project feature within a PD, and we are able to lock in the affordability through the plan development zoning. We obviously look for many other things, but affordability is something that we've seen more and more of the city's plan developments in the past few years since Greenville 2040 was adopted. Next slide, please, Austin. So here are the plan development requirements per the City of Greenville Land Management Ordinance. The property must be at least 1 acre. The process has to go before the Planning Commission and be approved by the City Council. It's essentially a rezoning that requires your recommendation to City Council. These bodies review the application packet, which must include a regulating plan. The regulating plan shows the development concept, building layouts, orientation, open space, access, parking, and much more. The applicant must prepare a statement of intent, which describes the development and the approach to the project. Additional information not included on the regulating plan may be provided in that statement of intent. These documents must describe the project in sufficient detail for the Planning Commission and City Council to review the proposal and determine if the PD meets the standards for approval. The Planning Commission and City Council may also attach conditions to a PD, which are additional requirements that the development must follow if approved. These conditions become a part of the zoning ordinance, and the developer must fully comply with the conditions as they build their project. Next slide, please. Once approved by City Council, the Planning Development Zoning District is added to the official zoning map. The next step is the developer must submit what's called an FDP, or a final development plan. These are not necessarily permit level drawings, but sometimes they are pretty close. They're very specific as we're getting closer to building permit issuance. Staff or the Planning Commission reviews the submitted FDP, and that usually is determined by a condition in a final or in the plan development. If it is not a condition of a plan development that it come back to the Planning Commission, it automatically stays at staff level per the zoning ordinance. Staff and the Planning Commission would review the submitted final development plan to make sure the plans comply not only with the approved plan development, but with any conditions that may have been included by City Council as part of the plan development ordinance. Remember, those conditions become a part of the zoning, and the project must comply with those conditions. Once the FDP has been found to be in compliance with the plan development, any applicable conditions and the general requirements of the land management ordinance then may proceed to permitting and construction. Major or minor deviations may be approved as part of the project. So I won't go into this too much, but I wanted to make sure that people understand that a minor deviation is something small or technical that wasn't considered as part of the original PD zoning request, or which is immaterial to the project. Minor deviations may be approved by staff if they fall within the limits prescribed in the ordinance, and there are actual limits that are prescribed in the zoning ordinance available online. If the change is major or would drastically alter the project, perhaps increase in height, a major change in density, circulation, that is considered a major deviation and requires City Council approval. The developer would have to go through the map amendment process to request the change, and the ordinance would for their plan development must go back through the planning commission for review and recommendation to the city council and would have to be approved by city council. Okay, next slide. So now we'll get into the Woven project. Thank you for a little bit of time just to kind of set the stage with plan developments. As a reminder, the property is located along Pendleton Street, just beyond the commercial core of the Village of West Greenville. The properties currently in the city are zoned RDV, Redevelopment District, and C1, Neighborhood Commercial District. The properties are located within the West Greenville Special Emphasis Neighborhood. The 6 new parcels are proposed to be added to the neighborhood as part of the annexation. Next slide, please. This map shows the property proposed for annexation as part of this project. The total annexation area is approximately 1.366 acres. Next slide, please. This slide shows a summary of the zoning, future land use, and services that are pertain to this property. The county parcels are currently served by Parker Fire and Sewer District. Next slide, please, Austin. This site plan shows and provides some of the details, but we can see them better on the color rendering, but wanted to show you the overall site plan. We can go to the next slide. The proposed Woven project consists of 2 5-story buildings, except for the one building that is the larger building. It's actually 5-story over basement. On part of it, it is 6 stories on 2 blocks next to the Village of West Greenville. These buildings contain up to 254 multifamily units and 30,000 square feet of commercial space. The building seen on the left wraps a 420 space parking garage, which would be accessed from Smith Street. At the time that this was presented to Planning Commission in July, approximately 36 of the garage parking spaces were to be available for public use. As a note, and it will be addressed later in the presentation, City Council recommended a proposed step back during the first reading that would remove approximately 11 units from the project along the rear of the buildings. This would take the unit count down to approximately 240. So it started at 254, it came down to 251, and based on after first reading, it's currently at 240. Public open space includes a new outdoor plaza located on Pendleton Street and a new community park south of the project. The new park and relocated Morgan House serve as a buffer from the existing 1-story mill homes. I must also, if we can go back to that slide, Austin, must also state that an additional property was purchased to include for green space after this went to the Planning Commission. That cannot be considered as part of this plan development request. It was not part of the original plan development request, cannot be part of this zoning. It would have to go back through an additional annexation if it's not already annexed in the city, which I don't think it is, and zoning process on its own. So even though the developer has offered that, we can't just add that to a plan development halfway through the project. So I wanted to make note of that because that's important to note from a process. Make sure that we follow process. Okay, if we can go to the next slide now. As mentioned, the buildings are shown with a maximum height of 75 feet. Along Pendleton Street, the buildings are stepped down to 2 stories to better integrate into the existing development patterns of the village. These storefronts provide space for commercial and artistic uses and serve as an extension of the village business district. During first reading in August, City Council requested the removal of the rear portion of the 5th floor, so there would be step backs in the rear as well as where the project abuts the single-family neighborhood. Streetscape and sidewalk improvements are also included as part of the project. Next slide, please. At the time this item was presented to the Planning Commission in July, the applicant had stated 10% of the residential units would be workforce affordable housing at 80% AMI. The developer had indicated a desire to partner with the city and the county to increase the number of affordable units to 20%. There have been a lot of moving parts related to the affordability since you all saw this in July that the developer can address, as well as the county council moving towards enacting policy to allow for a process of how affordability could be attained through a multi-county industrial park. In addition, the developer indicated that the Woven PD would include below market rate commercial space with 5 retail and commercial incubator spaces along Traction Street. These spaces are proposed to be deed restricted at 50% of market rates in the downtown central business district. As part of the amendments offered at first reading, City Council directed the developer to work with the city's Economic Development Department to help identify potential tenants for these spaces. Next slide. The project is consistent with the height recommendations of Greenville 2040, which identifies the village as a mixed-use urban node with building heights of 4 to 6 stories. However, the project does exceed the density recommendations of an urban node under Greenville 2040, which calls for an average of 30 units per acre. The woven PD at 240 units would be right at 82 units per acre. Next slide, please. We'll go through these quickly because I think a lot of these probably have changed since first reading, since y'all saw it, but this is just to get you up to speed as to what was presented in July. These are the perspectives, the view that is looking north at the project from Smith Street. Next slide, please, Austin. The view from the intersection on Lois Avenue across from the project site. For reference, the entrance to Village Ranch would be on your left in this image. This is the image that you would see driving along Pendleton Street through the village, heading away from downtown. Here is the view from the traffic light in the village, looking west along Pendleton Street. Another perspective looking down Traction Street. The one-story building with Bar Margaret, which is the former Golden Brown and Delicious, is visible on the left. That's what is on the left. And finally, the rear of the project with the existing one-story mill home shown for reference. At its public hearing, Planning Commission voted to recommend denial, which passed 5-1. Among the stated reasons for recommending denial were the mass, scale, setbacks, and density of the proposed plan development. No concerns were expressed regarding the annexation portion of the application. You should have at your desk the items that were specifically discussed by Planning Commission at the public hearing in July. I'm happy to review any of those if you would like to, but otherwise you have them available. A condition is included that if no progress is made within 3 years, the city will initiate a rezoning amendment to an appropriate zoning district under the new development code. Okay. Here's the original proposal by the developer. There was an annexation of 6 parcels, redevelopment of 12 total parcels, up to 254 multifamily residential units, with 10% of the units at 80% AMI, up to 30,000 square feet of commercial for restaurant, retail, artist galleries, and other uses. That was to include 3,000 square feet of representative retail and incubator space, Pocket Park available to the public, relocation and restoration of Morgan House, infrastructure improvements on Pendleton, Seiko, Smith, and Traction, and then the mix of the architecture. That was the original proposal by the developer. Next slide, please. These are the council amendments and conditions from August 22nd, at which council voted to approve this on first reading with these amendments by a 4-3 vote. The staff comments and conditions that were presented in the staff report shall apply. The rear portion of the 5th floor shall be removed to reduce building height and mass, and that was a portion, the rear portion. Additional 0.16 acre parcel shall be integrated into project as open space. Please note, I've already addressed that that cannot just be added to the plan development. They can say they want to do it as open space. We can ask them, but that is not currently what is before you. Incorporate the recommendations of the design review board to deliver on the promise to the community to make the project funky and cool. I think that that was really trying to work on the architecture if I was to try to read between the lines on that. Any required improvements to mitigate traffic impacts shall be installed, and the retail incubator space shall be restricted to 50% market rate and monitored through our Community and Economic Development Department. On October 19th, at Mayor and Council's request, staff did fly our drone, which we have at the city, to review the height. The next 2 slides show our urban design team's work on the mass and scale. Oh, I may not have them in the right place. I'm sorry. We'll get to that in a second. There they are. Thanks, Austin. So that is the height that was identified by our drone, and Barrett Armstrong was on site with Greg Dawkins, who is certified to fly the drone for the city of Greenville, and where that was taken. And if you have questions on that, Barrett can answer those. And if we'll go to the next slide, Austin, it shows that is the work from our team, from the city of Greenville urban design team, as to how that perspective would look. at eye height standing there at the corner. And I think that was taken at 5 feet. Yes, it was. Okay, thank you. And Austin, if we can flip back to the other. I want to also make sure to address the expressive interest and concern by the community that we have heard throughout this process. Staff did attend the neighborhood meeting on September 27th. We also noted that the concerns expressed during the Planning Commission public hearing during first reading and in numerous meetings we've had with residents and stakeholders for this project. We have met with numerous people and they're happy to continue to do so with the residents and the community on this project, both on site. And we did do walk. I think five members of planning staff walked with the community, including myself, on site, as well as we've had numerous meetings at our office. And I think that the community can attest that we have been available and are happy to. So I will say this is what we believe are the community's concerns that have been expressed in our meetings, but I want to make sure that we're not, I don't want anybody to think we're speaking on behalf of the community. And it may not be exhaustive of all their concerns. So that the development was incompatible with village character and history, that they wanted attention to the scale, mass, and density. I think that's probably the number one concern that we have received from the community, that they did see a need for vitality for local businesses. So we've heard about the desire to have, I do think that there is a desire, maybe on both sides, if I'm allowed to say, for there to be development of this property, to have community, to be able to support the community. The neighbors believe the project benefits businesses, but not the neighborhood, that there is a need for open space and buffering. There is, and we've heard a lot about this recently, is about the need for better pedestrian connectivity between the Brandon Mill neighborhood and Pendleton Street. Challenge with some of that is some of these properties and most of the properties where the connectivity would have to occur are not currently in the city, they're in the county. Traffic and parking issues have been raised, especially at the intersection of Lois and Pendleton. Construction road closures, noise and vibrations have been mentioned as a concern, and obviously the need for affordable housing. So I don't know that this list is exhaustive of everybody's concerns and interests, but did want to bring it to their contention of what we have heard and recognized as the planning staff. Hey, Austin, we could go to the next. So this item went before the the city council last Monday, October the 24th. And this is the direct verbatim motion that we pulled from listening to the city council meeting. Staff listened to the council meeting after the fact. I too have listened to the council meeting. And this is the exact motion made from Councilor Gibson, that I move council refer this matter to the Planning Commission for further study and recommendation and submittal of a supplemental report to council on the issue of density, mass, scale, open space, transition between main portion of project and community connectivity with surrounding communities, traffic and mitigation, affordable housing, and including but not limited to total height across all portions of the project. Such report shall be submitted to council no later than December 12, 2022. If we could go to the next slide. So one of the things that I think we would like to receive feedback from Planning Commission on today to help facilitate this process is what are our next steps in timeline that Planning Commission would like to see the staff take moving forward. Would you want to see a design charrette for the community? Community has indicated an interest to have one, and in order to make all the timing and get back to city council by December 12th. Y'all know, when that's less than 6 weeks at this point, or right at 6 weeks, that would probably need to occur the beginning of next week. So that's the first question. The second is, after today, you all may want to have another special called Planning Commission workshop, just like we're having today. We're fine to do that, but we would take your direction on that. And then right now, we are anticipating holding a special called Planning Commission meeting. And I think that if y'all are in agreement, on November the 29th at 4 p.m. So, and just so the community hears that, right now, the intention is for a special called meeting. It would contain a public hearing, November the 29th at 4 p.m. And that would, have we decided a location? We would be at the Unity Park Welcome Center. Unity Park Welcome Center. So those were things that we would like answered today if possible. And with that, Madam Chair, thank you for the time. I know that was lengthy. I appreciate you allowing us a little bit of time to kind of set that stage. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shannon. That helped tremendously for a recap. Can you pop the councilman's motion back up real quick? I just want to make sure I got all the points of that.
In fact, Madam Chair, I'd like to request a copy of that and the list of the points from the amendments that the council had made on a previous slide. I think there were 2 slides.
Yes, we will send those to you. Or we've got this amendments from first reading.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
And a follow-up to this, just so I understand. So they voted to approve, but then made a motion to send back.
So they voted on first reading to approve 4-3. When it went to second reading last Monday, they did not, their motion was to refer it back to Planning Commission for further review and study on all of these items.
Okay.
And then that report, which will require a public hearing, is, and your recommendation is due back to them by December 12th. Now, I will also tell you that this is, the only time I know this has happened, but it is allowable under the code to do what we're doing here today is with the Adams Hill development. And I know Meg was here for that. Diane was here for that. We did something similar where it was referred back to you all for further review and study. And I think that probably occurred in 2019, if I'm remembering correctly. And that was plan development. That's the only time I can remember it happening during my tenure here with the city.
Yep. I remember that. Okay. All right. Any other questions for staff right now?
I imagine there's going to be a lot of questions. And so
Yeah.
it may be best to allow a lot of follow-up too, because
For sure.
we're going to be bouncing.
Bouncing,
around.
yep. So are we going to hear from the applicant today, Shannon? That's the plan?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So if we have any questions that came from the staff report, is now the time to ask those.
You can.
You said the height of the proposal that we have before us now was 78.
It varies between 68 and 75 feet.
Does the staff know what is the max height of any buildings in the present West Greenville Village?
We do have the height of
besides
the Brandon
Brandon.
Mill.
Besides Brandon Mill?
Besides Brandon Mill, I'm not sure if we have all of that, but most of the village is 2 stories. There's one 3-story example, but most of the village is 2 stories.
And you would then say that that 2-story would be how high? 20?
It depends on the architecture. It can go anywhere from as low as probably 26 feet to up to close to 40 feet, just depending on the roof to ceiling height.
All right. And you said that the present density with the revisions that's been made is 82 units
Correct.
per acre. The comp plan you said was recommended 30 units,
An average of 30 units an acre.
and the present zoning, according to the original staff report, was 20 units an acre.
Correct.
Sorry.
RDV allows a maximum of 20 units an acre.
So our numbers that we're dealing with are 20 units, 30, and then the proposal at 82.
Correct.
Isn't there an affordability factor in the GVL 24?
There is. And so you can have an additional density based on the, if you do affordable, up to 10% affordable.
Which would take it from 30
And,
to,
and I would say that the nodes, don't say every project has to be 30 units an acre. It's an average of 30 units an acre. And I think
Plus-
that's important to note when we start looking at nodes, because I do believe, take this project out of the conversation. Let's just talk about nodes for a second in Greenville 2040. We have them throughout the city, and there are going to be instances, I'm certain, in nodes where you're going to have more than 30 units an acre in a building. That's the only way that we're going to get the density to support affordable housing. Having said that, you know, the average is what it was talked about. And as we start to look at our new code, when we do have our new code, you know, we're going to be focused more on the form of the buildings and how the built environment is resulted, and less about density. I think, I've said it multiple times, the density is important, but at the end, I think that the built environment and the character of the area is more important and what Greenville 2040 is trying to address.
So hasn't our consultant said all nodes are not created equal?
That's correct. All nodes are not created equal.
So
Each one has its own identity.
Is the density, can you go back over that again? So is the density RDV is 20 units or
Yes.
it's planned development? Okay.
Plan development can be any
Anything.
density that you all
All right.
allow
So
for.
the RDV is 20, but if it's affordable housing, it can go up to,
Not under the current code, only
Oh,
the
okay.
plan development.
all right, that's where I got confused. All right.
And then one of the conditions or the concerns of the residents was a better pedestrian connectivity.
Correct.
And you talked about the difficulty of that because it's going back to the existing communities outside the city. What would better connectivity mean?
So
Is this
there is a
pedestrian?
desire to be able to connect from Brandon Mill directly into the Village of West Greenville. And that is my understanding. And that there would be, that the community members that we walked with talked about wanting connectivity from the mill over into the village and a more direct path. Some of that could be accomplished in the city through sidewalk connections that are currently not there. So if you go out and walk some of those streets, like Smith and Saco, there are no sidewalks. And so trying to add sidewalk connections, where that becomes complicated is what is beyond our scope as far as the city of Greenville because of where our city limits end. And so I think that we obviously would like to see and work on some type of connectivity to be able to respond to the concerns from the community. But that's going to require some partnership as well and trying to work through what that looks like. But we can at least address it in our portion of what's under the city's purview.
And one final question. There's a list supposedly of what infrastructure improvements are planned. I guess those are pedestrian as well as roadway improvements. Do we have that list?
So
Or can
if
it
we
be
can
shared
go
with-
back to the site plan and then I would allow or ask the developer to, so that's good, Austin. So right now they're planning to wide Smith Street, I think from about 19 feet right of way to about 45, 46 feet of right of way. And to provide streetscape and sidewalk along Smith Street as well as, it looks, I believe there's also a plan for speed humps along Smith Street. As well as sidewalk and streetscape there along Saco Street.
Can I follow up? So with that picture right there, is that a parking lot or is that the underground parking? What's that showing?
That's the garage. The
Okay.
units wrap the garage. So
And
the
so
way,
over that will be other units or whatever.
that's right. The way that the applicant currently has the design proposed is there are two types of really parking garage construction. You can do a podium type garage where you pour it in place and it can be, it's really designed on site. So you have a podium or you have a precast garage and they are showing a precast garage with the units wrapping the garage to hide the garage units or the garage structure.
I got a couple of follow-ups to a couple of other things. All right, so 5 stories and y'all said it could be anywhere from 68 feet to 75
It's
feet.
because of the topography and the way that the buildings are structured or the buildings are on the site. If we could go back.
Because the drone shot was 68 feet.
That's right. And I don't know if they've got, the only thing that where we get the tallest side of the building is over on, you'll keep going. Is over on Saco Street. I don't know if we have a visual of that, Commissioner Enderlin, but that is what was presented before you all and after first reading. I know that there have been changes that the developer has made since then that you've not yet seen. So I would want him to verify the final heights based on information that he will be presenting, I think, here in a bit.
Okay.
Shannon, I have a question. The next steps that was listed with design charrettes with the community, what would that be? Who would be consider the community?
Anyone who wants to participate, we would open it up to the entire, I mean, we would do our best to open it up to anybody who wants to be there. The city staff would encourage that. We would not, it's not our, we wouldn't hold it necessarily because that's not within our purview,
Mhm,
but we would be there and help facilitate if there was a desire for us to participate in that role.
mhm.
But we would want it to be open to any and all, anybody and everybody that wants to be there.
Okay, so the limitation in terms of capacity is not necessarily a top number that you want to have people.
No, I think we would want the developer to have it if we could reserve the space. Obviously, the Unity Park Welcome Center would allow enough space for there to be people to participate. But we would have to find a location that could fit, enough people that would want to participate. But I don't think there's ever a desire, at least from the planning staff, to ever limit anyone's participation in a public process.
Because but with that, that can, those numbers can increase, and then you're hearing again a lot of input. You're talking about if the information that you provided from community input was the exhaustive information that was provided during that time. So, because I'm thinking like outcomes and having the design charrette, like what would be, and not saying for you to answer that, what would be the outcome from the developer side to be able to present to the community and getting that information? And then what's next after that? If it's then presented to planning and then we vote on changing that zone to PD, is that what that's?
So I would think that at this point, the first step is to hear what you all have to say as planning commission, ask questions and listen to your comments and suggestions on the design, where the design currently stands. If the next step were to have a design charrette, I think that it would be, you have to facilitate that in such a way where you've got some structure.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you'll have things all over the board, and it would have to be very specific items that would be put in front of, you like this color, you like that color, you like this type of window, you like that type of window, you like this design, that design. I mean, and I think you have to have some structure to the design charrette at this point, if that's the way that we go, in order to be able to get the comments back. Maybe that's not the right way. That's why I asked the question.
Okay.
We're doing our best here
Right.
with a situation that we're not, it's a bit unusual. So we're looking to you all for guidance to help us know how to navigate this moving forward.
I think some of the comments from DRB, the funky and cool things.
Yeah, I think we can move past that.
Right.
But
Yes,
if I'm allowed to say that.
I can say that.
Everybody else seems to agree with that. So I think we can move past that, but yes.
So would
Not
it
very
be,
descriptive.
so just, again, I know that the design charrette is an if. So having a design charrette, and I guess in where we are right now, an input that would help to really identify all these different aspects that are concerning. And if it is not knowing exactly what those selected people are that are coming from the community, like you're saying, it could be anybody or everybody. Would it be possible that if it's, planning and DRB to meet together and have that design charrette with the,
I think what I'd like to do is hear from the applicant before
Yeah.
we get into that conversation, because it may be there's another solution behind that.
That's right. And those are the kinds of things that I'm not sure I could answer right now
Okay,
today
yeah.
without having consultation with our legal team.
Yeah.
okay.
All right, you had one more
Madam
question.
Chair, I have
Yep.
one question, and it's really for Austin. Can you give us the height, the maximum height that project that we approved a couple months ago? I think it's townhouses. I think it's next to
Parker Group?
this. Yeah. What's the maximum height that could be?
Yeah, let me look at that and I'll get back to you in just a minute.
Okay.
Do you have one more follow-up?
I assume we're going to hear more about affordable housing also from the applicant.
Yes, I'm assuming so.
Okay. And can you clarify this 50% retail? All right. So my understanding is 3,000 square feet out of 30,000 square feet is going to be dedicated. Is that what we're talking about, the 50%?
No, there would be a certain amount of retail that would be at their 50% market rate. And in terms of their rents. And so that would have to be something that we would work on through community development and economic development to ensure compliance with that requirement.
All right, we don't really know the details on that yet either, right? So-
No.
Okay,
All right,
I think that's it.
cool. All right, we'll hear from the applicant.
In Ms. Eldridge, it's 40 feet.
Okay, the maximum height of the project next door is 40, could be.
And that would
up
be
to
the
40.
maximum height normally for any structures with the RDV or C1 designation.
Thank you,
So unless they were single-family detached.
thank you.
Yep, I think they're ready.
And if you'll state your name and address, that'd be great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Brian Schick. I'm with Woodfield Development. Address is 1121 Solly Circle, Greenville. And this is my able assistant, Joe Bryant, with Seaman Whiteside Civil Engineers. He's going to put some easels up because since this for initial planning commission meeting, we've created some images that I think will be very helpful to see for those commissioners that were here, because we put them into 3D, representative of our Revit model, our 3D model. And also it might be helpful, if you don't mind, just go back to the slide that shows the amendments that the city council put in, if you don't mind. So let's just put the site plan up.
Just left you.
Kind of assistant if you wanted.
Is this better? I'm just going to stand in front of this so we can, y'all prompt me if there's some things on here that haven't been covered I thought this would be helpful to see this. So let's just bring us back to the last time we were together. I know we have a new member of the Planning Commission, and I believe you were on the phone. I'm not sure how much you're able to hear, Commissioner. But this is what was presented. Shannon aptly points out that this is what is in the PD application before you. And since then, we have done some things, listening to the community, listening to this Planning Commission that I wanted to share with you. And we have some 3D images to address as well. But one of the big things has to do with the buffer or the setback. And since this Planning Commission, I think the comment, Chairman, came from you that we did a good job addressing the front of the project where we stepped it back, but the back needed some work. So we took that seriously. We heard this from the Brandon community. We've heard it from the West Greenville community. And we went and we were able to get this parcel under contract. And this has the effect of, by a 3.8x, almost 4 times increasing the green space. From our very first, which we had 2 meetings at the Brandon community, one during COVID and what I call it the pizza party we had in the field right here, the other at the Brandon Neighborhood Association. They talked about the need for open space. And they wanted to be available to them. They didn't want it to be fenced off the way that the Brandon apartment redevelopment is fenced off. So this is not fenced. This is meant to be a pocket park that also doubles as a buffer. So we've almost quadrupled the size of that. And you'll also see in an image, it addresses the connectivity concern to at least get folks from Saco over to Smith. And I think an opportunity exists if this parcel could be acquired by the city and this field here, we know this developer, to create further connectivity all the way from the village, from the commercial corridor over into the community, and eventually to the Arts Center over here that's attached to the Brandon redevelopment of the apartments. So I just want to have this site plan here to see. So you see from here to here, this whole void has been added in. For the new commissioner, this is a relocated 2-story house. It's deemed to be locally historic in that this was the night superintendent of the mill. I believe that's correct. Let's see, Teresa Slack was here. This so-called Morgan House currently sits here, and we propose to move it across here and relocate it for a couple reasons. One, it could become more artist lofts. Up to 6 artists we believe can be in this building. It also helps with the transition down from the more intense use down to the single-family, one-story traditional broke-back mill houses. This distance from here to here is about 111 feet, by the way. So significant buffer and setback. The next thing, since we have stepped back the front of the building, and I'll put an image up here in a second, we've been asked to do this, and since then, we offered, and the city council put it into their motions, to step the building back in the back as well as the front. So two images to show that are, this perspective is from Smith Street. You're in the neighborhood now. You're looking down Smith Street back towards the signal on Pendleton. And you can see how we've stepped it back from 5 stories down to 4 stories on each side here. Now Shannon, and then here's the relocated Morgan house. So you're going from 5 to 4, buffer, 2-story, 1-story. Shannon mentioned the topography. It's important. So going from Smith Street down to Traction, where the commercial corridor is, the grade drops off. And going from Smith Street down to Seco Street, the grade drops off. Here is another image looking from Seco. So we're in the neighborhood, and we're looking back at the building where you can see the step back, where it is here down to here. Now, this is the condition where there's a podium. There's a concrete podium here. So it's 5 levels of wood frame construction over a podium with the basement condition. So there are 5 units, I believe, here. See them here. Under the podium. This here is a trash room. We work with the city. They want us to tuck our trash in. So underneath the podium here is one of 2 trash rooms to keep the trash cans from being pulled into the street. That was at the request of the city. And with this ability to acquire this new lot, in this space right here, I should probably move that over. This created an opportunity for pedestrian and cyclist activity, connectivity from Seco up the hill to Smith, and this further buffer and pocket park for the community. So in addition to the setback being increased, we have the step back. And this was our effort to address some of the things that the Planning Commission said to do to address the back of the building. And to see them in 3D, we think has been helpful. Before I get to these other images, are there any questions about what we've done with the step back and the setback and the buffer?
You said that the historic house, it's 2-story.
This is a 2-story house.
Do you know what the?
Most of them are single stories that the operators of the mill, and this was one of the superintendents.
You know what the height of that to the top?
I do not know what it is to the top of the gable.
And then your step back next door is 4 stories. Can you tell me what the height that is?
I should have come prepared with this, but I do not know all those specific heights. But I will say the reason that we're at 68 feet when the drone flew, sir, the highest point of the building is this corner right here because of the drop off in topography. This is where that highest point would be. Really here to there. Now it drops down. So that's why there's a differential from the 68. This would be the new high point because of the drop down to Seco Street.
And how high would that be?
Again, I need to get you all these points here, the new reduced setback, maybe all 8 corners of the building, if you will. We'll get those to you.
Can you see the Morgan house on that?
Right here.
Yeah, okay.
So the Morgan house was kind of a 3-for. It creates more of a buffer with the single family, less intense use, single story, broke back houses. It creates a natural transition down from 5 to 4 to 2 to space to 1. That was the intent. It also creates the opportunity to have more art space to keep our artists in the village. By the way, we've entered a memorandum of understanding with the 4 artists that are being displaced in the bank building on the corner. They will move into this building during construction when we relocate it and refurbish it. We're keeping their rents frozen where they are today. And then eventually they will move into the woven gallery, which you'll see in a minute on the corner. And that is the intent, to keep them sustainable in the village. And this will open space up for even additional artists. The next image is just that. It's like I planned this, but I didn't. So this is the prominent corner where the signal currently exists, Lois Street, now looking back down Smith. So this is this corner here. That's where those artists will go into here. They will have their studio space there. They also will curate the gallery for village artists and others. Back on the cool and funky, sounds like nobody wants to talk about that anymore, but that was the words I think that came out of the design review board meeting when we met with them informally. They're very supportive of this, by the way, but they wanted to make sure that the project fit into the village and acknowledged that this was the Arts District of Greenville, and that's, I think, how they came up with that terminology. So you'll see this colors. Each rendering of the building, since you saw this initially, has colors added to it. And we had a subsequent meeting with the design review board, Katie Skoloff, who specifically came up with the Sherwin-Williams codes and the concept of ombre. You start with a darker color and it has gradation down to a lighter color. So each side, as you see these renderings, look for that to be evocative of being in the Arts District. The brick, of course, of this with these windows is meant to be evocative of the Brandon Mill. This is an homage to being in the Arts District. And again, directly with design review board input, their colors were put on the building since we met with you initially. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out some things. We talked about traffic and issues. We have encouraged the most recent neighborhood meeting that this is a great opportunity at the intersection of Pendleton and Smith and Lois for this to be a speed table, to raise this up, to slow traffic, to dissuade some of the cut-through traffic of people just trying to get to Easley or from Easley into the city and trucks. That's a major problem. Things that need to happen to make the folks that are just cutting through the village use the bigger roads that are there, like 25, White Horse Road, or 123. So a speed table is something that we'd be willing to help fund privately. You see these two plazas. These constitute about 7,500 square feet. This is almost as big as the plaza that already exists where the street was cut off of Perry in the village. And these are open to the public, not just for our residents, and will have Wi-Fi access. Another image on the other corner of the building. Again, y'all have not seen these. Slide them down. This is Seco Street. And again, these images you're seeing are not just artists running. These are to scale. These are in Revit. They're in a 3D model done by our architect with the input from the actual grades from Seaman Whiteside, our civil engineer. We received the Revit file from the Parker Group for the 28 approved townhomes that were going to go just to the east of this site, west of this site. So again, this isn't just an artist concept. This is actual from the architect's Revit file, superimposed. So as you come in, you can see how these really high ceilings on these 3 stories plus a gable will largely mask the view of the building as you come in, where it's 5 stories over a basement condition on Seco. This green portion is the market retail. You were talking about numbers. This is roughly 8,000 feet of commercial at market rate. Then you're going to see in the next image where we have the affordable commercial space we've proposed. And that's 5 units, about 500 feet on average for those. Again, you get another view of the plaza. And something I want to point out is, our goal is to have an affordable food use in here. We heard that over and over again from both meeting with the West Greenville Neighborhood Association and meeting with the Brandon community. The village needs an affordable food source. They used to have Neo Burrito from Asheville, and they failed and left. We're hoping to put an affordable food use into this site. The last thing is there is a proposed rail-to-trail conversion that connects where the streetcar and the rail line connected the Dunedin Mill to the Jetson Mill, to the Brandon Mill, and to Woodside. And that bed exists. I can't speak to it in detail, but we have a map of it, and we had a proponent come out and speak, and it would be coming up by the Brandon Mill and turning, and they are very pleased to see this wide 15-foot path of connectivity, back to the connectivity issue, along our frontage that goes along the whole way, and eventually could be connected to the circus line they're trying to get Norfolk Southern to give right of way, so there could be a path along the Norfolk Southern line to connect the West Greenville and this business corridor to Unity Park. So we're excited about the potential for that. A third 3D image shows the Traction Street interaction. And to your point, this is where these 5 micro units are for representative retail. And we're under a memorandum of understanding with Mill Village Ministries to essentially curate who goes into this space. One of the motions that we're going to work with the city, community, and economic development division to essentially codify setting these 5 bays, these 5 retail bays, at targeting 50% of what the market commercial retail rents are in downtown Greenville. So to try to bring the opportunity for affordable commercial space to the building. We already have 2 tenants that have raised their hand for these 5 spaces. One is Holy Smoke Barbecue, who has an operation where they smoke their barbecue in Malden. It really started in this area of the town and couldn't find a space for rents. So we reached out to Mr. Hester. He's so happy to know he would have a storefront here, smoke the barbecue somewhere else, serve it here. And he spoke in favor at the council first reading. So we're excited about him being committed. Second would be the Village Launch, which is one of in the Mill Village Ministries, Dan Weidenbrenner's organization that is helping small and minority women-owned businesses to flourish and to create companies. They give them training. And this, at least one of these bays, will be represented by Village Launch. So we can be assured. And this is a relatively new concept. I don't know where this exists anywhere in South Carolina. And this is something that we offered. And an example that Shannon made at the very point of being a planned development, you do have that opportunity to collaborate between the developer and the staff and come up with these creative ideas. And this is one of those that's unique to this development. So in addition to affordable housing, which I'll get to, affordable commercial and keeping artists in the building at affordable rents, in addition to the green space where we have commercial peacefully coexisting. Another point is when we didn't have the benefit of these 3D images, when you just saw the 2D images that were in the application that Shannon went over, it just, for the average bear, it just looks like it's just as flat. It's 2D. You can't perceive. But I want to point out in this image, you can see the pool is up here elevated. See how it's set back naturally in that L shape that goes around the pool. So it kind of gives some offset as well that you can't appreciate by just looking at a sheet that's 11 by 17. It's in just only two dimensions. So we think that these 3-dimensional images that are to scale are helpful in that regard.
I thought I saw somewhere 30,000 square feet of commercial space. Is that?
I think it's on the first page of the original application, but from memory, this is about 8. About 8. This has its own space, the artist gallery, but it's not really. But if you look at the first page of the original application that had staff support, that's on that page.
It does say 30,000 square feet.
I don't know if it includes the garage, but that's enough. Joe, can you make a point for us to break down all these different spaces in the program to make sure we get all that in addition to the heights of the buildings at all the corners? This is another image that you have not seen, and we showed at the neighborhood meeting.
Joe will make a note. Ryan, how much are you thinking it is, commercial wise?
And so, Meg, I thought that the market rate was about 8,000 feet. Then there was some space for the, I know it probably adds up if you count our leasing office. That's not rentable square feet. I think that's probably X factor if you're counting it's non-residential. So I bet it adds up into that with our leasing office with the mail room and the package room and all that. So
Because it does say up to 30,000 square feet of commercial space.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the application, I'll set up to 254 units.
Yes, so if we can just clarify that, I think that'd be helpful.
Okay. So these last 2 images were asked for early on. It took some time for them to be developed. And it's good to see that the city went out with their own drone to confirm this height was accurate. You may recall at your first planning commission meeting that one of the concerned citizens came with their own effort at doing this. And it frankly showed the building about this tall. So it's absolutely inaccurate. Don't doubt them for trying to do that. But this is again set with the commercial drone. This is on plans from the GIS system by professional engineers, by professional architects who have their licenses to jealously guard. This is accurate, and it's now being confirmed by the city staff. So this is from the intersection section where the light is. This is from the so-called entrance to the Pace Jewelry Store. Let's talk about affordable housing for a second. We'll just take one big step back. How do we get here? And we talked about this briefly in the short time that I had at the Planning Commission meeting initially. As a private developer, this would be our 5th project in Greenville. We responded as a private sector to 2 guiding documents that the City Council and this Planning Commission supported. The 2040 Comprehensive Vision Plan was adopted unanimously twice by the City Council. Keyword, it called for an average of 30 dwelling units per acre in this new concept of these nodes, but it deemed the village a node, and so we responded to that. I think average is key, and this is a planned development, so really we could have asked for a 100-story building, and if the community and this commission and the council wanted it, we entered that negotiation process. We had many meetings with the staff before we got to this point, and we have proposed speed humps, by the way. We initially had a skywalk that was over the building that we were asked to take away. We've changed 2 or 3 times the plaza to where it engages with the public at the staff's request. So multiple things with the staff, and we greatly appreciate the professional staff, the effort they put in this, and for their support. The second document was the village micro plan that I understand that this planning commission approved. And that called for, in this tight section of the village, for up to 90 dwelling units per acre. And it noted 2 potentials in their study area for what they call a catalyst site that would be worthy of this intentional density. And the Steve Warnick, the author of that plan, the consultant hired by the city, has said that this woven site is one of those 2 catalyst sites. So we responded to those 2 guiding vision documents, the 2040 plan, the micro plan, and we put together a pro forma. And then the third key thing that the matter of public policy, the city had supported the what's known as the McLaren project and the AGFA site. And they used a very powerful tool that is rather unique to South Carolina, a multi-county business park that allows, they've deemed if a development, a private development and mixed use has a public good, you can bring in this tool to leverage additional affordable housing. And those projects are what we put into our pro forma, which had 20% of the residential units affordable. And that was designed, half of them at 80% of the area median income and half at 60% of the area median income. So again, those 3 things that the City Council and this Planning Commission adopted and put into public policy, we responded to as a private sector. Nodes, the village, and we needed 3 things. We needed to get maximum density to be able to give back upwards of 20% of affordable back to the project. We needed to get downtown rents in the market portion of the project. And we needed.
Okay, Brian, thank you. We just can really hear facts today as far as the changes from the physical nature of the comments. So we understand where all that came from.
Shall I update you on where the county is since you first met with us on this incentive? Because affordable housing, as I understand it, was one of the charges that was when this was remanded to Planning Commission to update you on affordable housing.
Does staff have an update on that, or is that something that what he's referring to as far as the county's affordability incentive?
We don't have an update on that at the moment. We just know that it did go to county council recently and is in the process of trying to be adopted. I think that there were some amendments made. We can try and get that for you on our break, when you break for lunch, to be able to provide additional information to that policy.
Okay, if you can get with Brian on that and just you guys coordinate the answer to that question, that'd be awesome.
I can tell you where you are right now in 1 second.
I'd rather you confer with Shannon just to make sure that that's, I don't want to hear I just want to make sure what she understands what you know before we hear it.
I'll share the screenshot from the county commission meeting.
Okay. All right.
If I may, Mr. Schick, if you could hold the slides up to, I'm sorry to ask you to do this, but the people viewing at home could not see your slides on the boards. The camera is right there in the corner where the green dot is. If we could show this, if, when you're done, if someone could just go through and put all the slides up or the boards and show them to the camera
Okay.
so that anyone who is viewing remotely has the ability to see those, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want to do that now or later?
Did you have some updates that you wanted to
I
share
have
with us?
update on building heights.
Perfect.
Courtesy of our civil engineer, Seaman Whiteside. So this corner attraction has a height of 59 feet. This corner, with taking the 11 units off, stepping the building back on Smith, is 48 feet. Similarly, 48 feet on the other side of Smith Street, where we've stepped back the building and removed 11 units, reducing the density from 254 to 48 units. The height to the ridge pole of the Morgan House is 30 feet. And then the height at this back corner where we've dropped the building down is 60 feet. And depending on how you measure the Brandon Mill, whether you go to the smokestack or not, even if you went to the parapet, I think that's something like 83 feet, irrespective of the water tower and the smokestack, of course, to their penthouse.
Does that get all the heights that you guys needed? Okay. All right. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah?
Yeah.
This is
Great.
the updated, are they seeing this? Do you know if they're seeing this?
Is there any way we can view to make sure that they are? Okay, Austin says they are. Thank you.
Okay. This is the updated site plan. You'll note in the lower left-hand corner where we've by 3.8x increased the setback, the buffer, and the pocket park available to the neighborhood for greater setback from the single-family residence.
Brian, I'm going to stop you just a second. We're going to take a break and grab lunch while you're doing that, so
Sure.
you can continue if that's okay.
This is one of two renderings that we did to superimpose the building accurately behind the existing commercial retail on Pendleton Street, this one at the intersection. This is the other one that is tighter from the entrance to the Pace Jewelers. This is the intersection of Traction Street, showing the 5 retail bays, representative retail at 50% of the commercial rents. This is the intersection of Seco Street, where you can see to the right, to scale the approved 28 for-sale townhomes that are going in where it meets our project, looking from the west to the east on Pendleton. This is the other corner from Lois and Smith and Pendleton, with the white building being the gallery, the relocated artists, looking down the 45-foot wide, including the sidewalks on Smith Street, and you can see the public plaza as well. And then to address stepping the building back in the back of the building, since the first planning commission meeting, you can see how we've lowered from 5 stories to 4 stories on Smith Street, where it meets the relocated Morgan House, 2 stories down to the single-family neighborhood. And a similar image to show the step back of the building on Seco Street, where it stepped back that 11 units, that floor down, and where the pocket park that has been expanded by 3.8x times from the original design that was submitted, the relocated Morgan House as part of that buffer, 111 feet from the next house to the property line of the building. Thank you.
Cool. Good. Good. Okay, awesome. Thank y'all. We just needed a quick little break to get some food, so I appreciate that and your patience. Just as a follow-up, the applicant handed me a clarification on the square footage of commercial space. Up to 30,000 square feet of commercial space includes restaurant, retail, office, et cetera. The Village artist space is 2,200 square feet. Retail with terrace at 2,040 square feet times 2. Market rate retail at 5,800 square feet. The retail incubator at a total of 2,900 square feet, which is 5 bays of 580. And then that leaves 12,940, which is leasing office, amenity, fitness, those sort of things associated with the development. So that answers that question. Just as a reminder, before we start making comments, this is not a deliberation. We will not hear public comment, so just use this forum for mainly questions of the applicant, clarifications, and after we're kind of complete with that, we'll come together and work with staff and figure out what next steps need to be. Does that sound like a plan, Shannon?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. All right. With that, I guess, Brian, if you want to come back up, you're welcome to, applicant. And I guess I'm just going to ask you some direct questions as far as based on our comments from the previous meeting. We, the Planning Commission, have kind of a bullet pointed list direct from the, I don't know if you've received these from staff, but I'm sure they can provide these to you. But these were essentially a Cliff Notes version of kind of the comments we gave you during our previous Planning Commission meeting. So really what I wanted to kind of come back to that because we haven't obviously been privy to the council meetings until now. This is kind of our first debrief on all that. So I guess one of my questions to you is without deliberating, this is hard, Janet. I'm still extremely concerned about the scale and mass of this thing. And so, and frankly, the moves you've made have been admirable, but maybe not all the way there. So I'm still questioning the fact that these, the micro plan, you actually mentioned that as well, but there's these 6 ingredients that are listed in the micro plan, being small and intimate, unique spatial identity, designed for social interaction, locally driven and locally responsive, functional, and a mixed community. Some of those I think we've hit. I think we're there. But the ones that I'm a little concerned about would be the small and intimate, a little bit on the unique spatial identity. Those are probably the two biggies, and mainly it falls. I think you've addressed 2 sides of the building pretty well, the front and the back, but it's really how we talk about that, the center, Smith, I think it's Smith Street. That's the one that I kind of feel like we've maybe turned our back to a little bit. And this is actually a comment to staff. It concerns me that the DRB is being prescriptive about paint and recommendations for what, whenever we talk about things, we always say, well, we're not the designers. We can only make comments. You guys have to go make those design decisions and for yourself generally. I mean, we can kind of make a broad statement. And that was the same when we were on DRB too. And frankly, it concerns me a little bit that they're being as prescriptive as a specific paint color, to go down that drive or that street. So I think there's I'm not sure there's a question in here, frankly, although there needs to be.
Sure.
I guess my question to you is, how do you feel like this street can be scaled down to a sense of, right now we've got 2 5-story buildings essentially, and while they do have some some in and out, but I do think the scale of the length maybe is part of that issue. So is there an opportunity that we can look at to really break that facade more intentionally, even if it's a gap somewhere down the middle? Or I just think there's maybe an opportunity to help that streetscape a little bit. And I think the width of the street would help, obviously. But I do think, you know, we still have some, or at least we still have some effort that needs to be taken. Think about how those facades are articulated. So,
Why don't we start with Smith Street? You had a lot in there, but I can talk about
Okay.
Smith.
Yeah, that
I
was
think
a
you
lot,
brought up
sorry.
Smith last time. Nick, can you just find on the packet you brought just the green, those images? I think you made 11 by 17s, and we can show the green. The green is a project of 271 units of garage wrap, like this same type, on South Main Street, 1108 South Main Street, catty corner from the baseball stadium. It's built. It too has 5 stories and at 1.6 stories with 5 stories over a basement where it's closest to downtown. And we took a photograph, that's correct, took a photograph of the green as built with, it was completed in 2019. So we have that much longer since it was for the greenery to come into almost full maturity. So I recall, Madam Chairman, you mentioned a concern about the tunnel effect. So just to bring everybody to date, Smith Street is 19 feet wide from edge of asphalt to edge of asphalt. There are no sidewalks in Brandon, the Brandon community that I know of. Joshua's the president. Are there any sidewalks in Brandon, Joshua? Okay, so not on Smith, not on Seco, not on Traction at this portion of the street. So part of the discussions with the city staff and the transportation department was to increase, as Shannon said, up that from 19 feet to a total right-of-way of 45 feet. And we're introducing curb, planting strip, 5-foot sidewalk on both sides, additional planting, trees, tree lights, and then the residences walk out. So it'll feel like townhomes or kind of walking through South Slope in Brooklyn, if you will. And with, as you can see from this picture that I handed of an actual property in Greenville, that is just a few blocks from here, what that pedestrian experience is like as you, the image that and we can show this in a bit to the camera, of what the commissioners are looking at is Main Street to their left, curb, planting strip, sidewalk, planting, building. You really don't, because of this, you don't get a sense for that you're at 6 stories right there. So I just want to be able to have this, and it's great that we're talking about that. As far as intimacy, I didn't write the project, but I think the intimacy was referring in general to the village area plan, but Warnick, the consultant, referenced 2 catalyst projects that could be even greater density, up to 90 dwelling units per acre, and per what the 2040 plan said, 4 to 6 stories. And he said, this is one of the sites. The site that we now have under contract is one of those sites. So I think there are pockets of the mixed-use development program that are intimate, like the 7,500 square feet of public plaza that we're putting in at private expense. So I would say it has pieces of intimacy. There's intimacy in this 12,200 square foot pocket part. There's intimacy in the main plaza. There's intimacy in the corners, intimacy around the representative retail that's in our program. But for the micro area plan, 90 dwelling units per acre, we're at 83 now, Shannon said. Just that's how it parts those 2 apart. You had 2 other comments at the beginning as well.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, it was mainly about the articulation down the sides of these buildings that, you know, that's left for a deliberation question, honestly.
DRB, just so you know, we were required to go before the DRB informally. It's a very positive meeting. Those notes are in the application. And there was an offer from the dais for them to engage. And I think I actually asked if you have comments on the colors to make sure it's representative of being in our arts district, I'd be welcoming of that. Staff arranged after first reading to have that meeting. We did, and it came to the point to where this concept of the gradation of color, a different color on each of these 6 elevations, and down to what the Sherman-Williams code was suggested, and we adopted it. It was suggested that we adopted it. We thought it was a good idea. Happy to receive it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's a comment to you. That's more of a comment just in theory about boards and commissions giving direct
Yeah.
paint colors.
There you go.
That's the question.
Hard to respond to cool and funky.
Yeah, I'm not sure cool and funky is a architectural term.
I couldn't find it in the glossary.
No, I'm sure you couldn't. I'll open it up to other questions.
I don't think this is necessarily for the applicant, but what is a node? I mean, do we have a description
Yeah.
of a node?
So outset from Greenville 2040. Shannon, you can help me too. See if I can find. Bet she can note. Yeah, here we go. A node is an area that evolves over the next 20 years into a mixed-use community hub that features housing, some of it with income restrictions to achieve affordability goals, employment opportunities, and a wide variety of retail, services, and community functions. Nodes have a traditionally scaled urban form of 4 to 6 story buildings and feel like miniature versions of downtown Greenville. Careful design of the streets and public spaces, as well as an average density of 30 housing units per acre, create a vibrant atmosphere that enables walking, biking, and higher levels of transit service as desirable alternatives to cars.
All right, so I assume there's no rules about how we balance the node idea with the village plan idea.
Well, they should work together.
Right.
The problem is they contradict each other a little bit, which is where he sits right now, is in the contradiction, unfortunately. There's another. So this one is indicated as the urban node mixed use, which is the 4 to 6 story buildings. These areas include more vertical mixed use than horizontal mixed use, with a preference for commercial retail uses on the first 2 floors and office, and residential on the upper. Again, that average residential density of 30 housing units per acre. Emphasis on quality urban design that seamlessly integrates the public and private realms to create a vibrant atmosphere that encourages walking, biking, transit service, that sort of thing. Which is not dissimilar to the micro plan.
So did you not want to talk about affordable housing?
I wanted
Yes.
to make sure that the staff concurred with Brian's.
So with affordable housing, it is something that you can ask for and the applicant can volunteer to do as part of the plan development. But we have to be very careful because when we start getting into requirements without a willing participant by the developer, it can be considered inclusionary zoning. Even as part of PD, if we're not careful on how that is structured, and we are not allowed to have inclusionary zoning in the state of South Carolina. It does appear that the county did pass the policy last week. And so there are specifics about what that would look like to allow for an MCIP, multi-county industrial park, that would allow for there to be basically tax abatements that support affordable housing. And there's a whole structure in their policy that's available online about what that would look like and the percentages that would have to be met and what that results in terms of the total tax abatement.
So are we at a point now where he can go into more detail about their thoughts about affordable housing on this project?
I think you can listen to yes, if you have a specific question about affordable housing, I would frame it in a form of question about what their intentions are related to affordable housing, related to the project. And a reminder to the applicant, we need to keep the answers specific to the questions that are being posed by the commission.
Well, can you just give us more detail on your thoughts
I know,
on
I'm just
affordable housing?
I'm just trying to make sure we're following process.
Yeah, is that okay? Is that
That's
a
okay.
decent question?
Okay.
So I was born on a sunny Tuesday. Sorry.
Mr. Developer.
So to take us back, the 2 opportunities were the city of Greenville and the county, and that's what it takes in South Carolina, for a county and a municipality to come together to create a multi-county industrial park, which has now been called a multi-county business park. Another operative term for this is a fee in lieu of tax arrangement. If there's a public benefit, which can be affordable housing, it can be public parking, it can be open space. That has been deemed, and there's case law that has been proven in the state that you can use this tool that was initially envisioned to attract industry and jobs to bring public benefits to projects. So Greenville's done it twice. They did it for the McLaren project. They did it for the AGFA site. And again, they gave them a 50% abatement of taxes for 20 years to have upwards of 20% affordable. Half of those were at 80% of the area median income as set by HUD, federal agency. Half were at 60% of the area median income. In fact, that's what I put into my pro forma, thinking we would get that tool. In the application that was presented to the Planning Commission and voted on first reading, we offered, because it's what is in the 2040 vision plan, to be a minimum of 10% affordable housing at 80% of the area median income. That is foundational to what we have offered with no time limit. If we were to get what was in the application approved, we needed the density to be able to give back the affordable. All along, we've had the intention that as the county proceeded with their efforts, which they have, as Shannon just noted, to try to get the McLaren deal that was what was baked into our pro forma. We want it to be 20% affordable. And now that's upon us. They've actually increased it. So the current thing that you can find, and I will send it to staff and the chair, the county has passed that they can give up to 50% tax abatement if a project is over $7.5 million, which this would be. And they have it at 20% and it has to be a minimum of 20% affordable units. So in this case, it would be 240 times 20, 48 units. And of that 20%, 20% of those would be at 80% of the area median income. 60% would be at 60% of the area median income. And 20% would be, for the first time introduced, at 40% of the area median income. I call this Star Trek. This is going to where no man has ever gone before in a Class A market rate development, to be able to get that far into moving the needle for a community to address their affordable housing needs. We are hopeful to make this a reality. And, but to do so, we need to get the maximum density that was always in our development, the 4 to 6 story, and what's in the program that's before you in the original application. I hope that was factual and succinct enough.
We have policy, and I've got the policy right here. We'll take care of making sure that those are sent to you all today.
I have a question to Brian. But he just to clarify, you said 48 units total for the affordable housing. Does that include, when you said 20% at 20% of the units at 80% AMI, and then you said 6% at 60% AMI, and then 20% at 40% AMI?
Yes, Commissioner, that's what's in the county policy currently.
Okay, so is that is those 48 units set aside, that's within those 48 units only, or is it also accumulation of other units out of all those other different percentages?
So since we reduced, because of the concern by the neighborhood expressed of the height, we created that step back by taking 11 units away. So we're at 240 units total. So to have 20% affordable, that's 240 times 20%, 48 units. And within that 48, 20% will be at 80 AMI, 60% at 60% AMI, and 20% at 40 AMI. So it's within that subset, if you will, of 48 affordable units. And these, by the way, we don't differentiate. These are all just for the studios. This would be on a representative basis for studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms.
This is, do you have to have 5 stories in order to make this project work? Could you not reduce the number of units, and therefore obviously the number of affordable units would be reduced also?
Our study of this is that we needed to maximize the density and have those 5 stories, because when you start taking floors off the building, you still largely have this precast garage that exists. So what it has the net effect of doing, Commissioner, is increasing the cost per unit, and therefore makes the economics not work to create a yield to an investor that would attract them. So sadly, again, that was a foundational thing. Get downtown rents, maximize the density, and maximize the fee in lieu of tax tool for affordable housing. And therein lies the challenge. So
Okay, so the answer is
No.
you have to have this project the way it is now, or you can't do it at all.
that's correct. And by giving
That's
those,
really- That's all I wanted to know.
Mhm.
Yes or no? Thank you. Excuse me.
So I think one thing that would help us to understand massing scale, and we saw this at a recent project that was proposed to us last month. I think it would be helpful if you could create I'm going to use the word grid, that would go north to south, east to west, and give us the height of the building as well as elevation of ground. So for instance, I'm going to do 3 grids going north to south. So I think from the other side of where the Anchorage front door is, from there all the way down Traction toward Mason. I don't know that you have to go all the way to Mason, but at least go past your own parcels. And then at Lois, kind of where the front door of what was Village Ranch there, going all the way to Mason. Revival Butcher, all the way down Saco toward Mason. And then west to east from Kitson and Pendleton to Bar Margaret, from Kitson and Witten to the backside of the Bar Margaret building that's on Traction, whatever that is. And then Saco to the far side of Traction. So we can kind of see, this way and this way.
Cross section.
Cross section.
What's above ground level?
I would give us like the topo and then the top. And we
Okay.
could give you an example that was given to us from, I'm thinking of we saw it last month at the Cleveland Street, where they went from the far side of Cleveland to the house that was on the far side all the way to Andover. So we kind of just see right across.
If you're asking staff to provide that information, you're asking, okay.
I would think from a topo standpoint, that's just using GIS topo. I mean, you don't need to go out and do anything, but I think if you could, just gather that way we could just see it. Because I do believe that a lot of the comments or some of the comments have to do with massing and scale. And for me, non-architect, I kind of got to see, okay, that's 24, 36 and here. And because you've got a site that is, that runs, significant north to south, deep into Brandon, and then also west to east. I mean, it is for where we are, it's a big piece of property. It's only 3 acres, but it's still a significant piece. And it's got 3 streets. It'd be one thing if you just had 1 street, but I think 3 streets, so that would be helpful.
So I'm getting acknowledgement from our civil engineer, Seaman Whiteside, that they've flown the whole area in their commercial drone, and they have that, and they can put that together for you as you desire.
That'd be great. Thank you. Did that
Yes.
capture that?
Yep.
Can we see what the motion from city council again?
For the first reading conditions or the second
The second.
reading?
Well, and that's a question I have too. Are we trying to consider both those together, or are we mainly focusing on the amendment?
No, no, you consider what they asked for a report on. You have a motion. You will have to have a public hearing and make a motion and make a recommendation back to city council. But at this point, you can think about their amendments and how they play into the design or any other changes that occur between now and then. But really, the focus was what happened at that reading about what they wanted you to focus on. That's what the report back to them has to include. It has to include all of these things.
Yes.
That's right.
So Shannon, a quick question on that. Obviously it went through first reading with some of these delineations of task, which the applicant has generally managed. So when it came, did council see what he just showed us?
No,
Okay, they were still commenting, this motion was still based off the original.
made the amendments, but when we presented at the council meeting on the 24th, none of this, it didn't get to that point. It didn't get that far. They didn't see all this.
Deferred prior to.
They referred it back to planning commission, to you all, to review the design before it got to them, before that part ever took place.
Okay. So we're seeing something they haven't generally at this point.
Yes, unless
Okay.
they were at the neighborhood meeting. Now, several council members did attend the neighborhood meeting on the 27th, which some of this was addressed, but some of it was not.
Okay. Okay,
But that's okay. I think that they've put it back in y'all's court and purview over all of these things.
Yeah.
And so as far as I'm concerned, it's, this is, that they're wanting your opinion and your recommendation on all of these items that were included as part of the motion.
okay.
Go
ahead.
Just to clarify, Shannon. We are not to take into consideration that additional piece of property that is.
That's right. Now, I know that the
That's
applicant,
hard.
I know it is hard, but it was not part of the original application. And so the only options are that you can't consider it, or they could withdraw, add it to the application and start the process over. So right now, it's not technically part of the PD, and it wouldn't have met the process requirements to be considered part of the PD.
Can it be rolled into the PD after, like if it-
Afterwards, but it'll have to go through its own annexation and rezoning process.
okay, but it can be rolled into the
Yes,
particular.
eventually
zoning.
it could, but it can't be right now because it wasn't part of the
Part of the
original application.
But we'd have to trust them to roll it in.
That's right. That's right.
Just can't consider it. We have to look at this as though that. is
Doesn't
not there.
exist.
That's right. Now, I know he's made his commitments as part of this, but that is not part of the plan development before you because it's not part of that.
And to start over, you're talking starting over neighborhood meetings, just all kind of stuff. You're talking,
Yes,
Pushing
that's
it far
right.
down.
It would be a withdrawal and a complete redo from the beginning. Correct.
Shannon, would it be possible for them to deed restrict that in some way and we could consider it, even if it was in the county?
I would have to confer with legal about deed restricting. I still don't think it doesn't change the zoning.
No, it doesn't change the zoning.
Right,
But
so-
as far, would it allow us to consider it as open space or green space buffering if it was deed restricted from anything but that use?
I think you could consider it and know it if that was done, but it can't be used to meet any PD open space requirements. So it can't count towards any PD open space percentages. And it would have to be in perpetuity. I don't think that it would be correct to have a plan development or have a deed restriction that ended after a certain end date.
Sure.
Because the fact of the matter is if it is eventually were to be rolled into the PD, if we ever get to that point, then the idea is that it would always remain as it was shown as open space, and that any other changes to that would require major modification to the plan development. And we can't require the deed restriction. It would have to be volunteered by the developer.
which is similar to the affordable housing.
Correct. It has to be volunteered. We can't require it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I do. I have one. Okay, to that point. If the developer states that there's going to be 10 or 20% of these units designated affordable, that becomes a part of the PD, right? So.
Correct.
They're locked in, okay.
How do we regulate that in general?
We would regulate it through our community development department. And they're used to dealing with that. We deal with it on other situations right now. So we would rely on their expertise to make sure that it was regulated on an annual basis.
The same would be for the commercial
That's right.
restrictions.
That would be also through our economic and development department economic development and community development. And we have a model that's been put in place a little bit through the work that we've done with the hotel conversions to affordable housing. If y'all remember the ordinance that we passed a couple of years ago that allowed for that. But we would rely on the expertise of our community development department to assist us with that, and they would require annual reporting to show that it was being met.
Would that ever expire?
Usually they do. I don't know with this MCIP with the county policy, so I don't want to answer anything on the county. But a lot of times our, the affordability components, if you'll recall, our hotel motel conversion, it was anywhere from 20 to 30 years, and it's deed restricted for 20 to 30 years with the intention that it could expire at some point after that time frame.
Do we know about these?
I don't know. Can't answer that today.
I think that's important for us to know, what the anticipated expiration date, if any, is on the units that they want to designate as affordable.
Can we discuss another workshop,
We can.
unless anybody else has any other questions?
No, I mean, I think there's still a lot of things that I'm not sure. While I think there have been some things addressed, I was just looking back through our comments from the previous meeting. I still think there's some things that have not been addressed. And so I do think, I mean, having seen this today, I would like to have a little more time with it, obviously. I mean, this was
Understood.
just to make sure I've not missed anything, and, you know, we all have a chance to properly prepare comments and whatever it may be. It would be lovely if it could be more of a working session with the applicant versus just a question. I mean, it's very hard for me to sit here and I can't make a comment to help the process along. I can only ask you a question, which doesn't really help you. So I don't know if there's an avenue in which we can make this as a more interactive process where we can help share.
We can try.
Comments
I'll
or-
work with legal on that, and we'll do our best to do whatever we can under the law between now and then whenever you have your next.
I mean, ultimately, I can sit here and ask 1,000 questions, but at the end of the day, he's got to read between the lines and figure out what I'm trying to say, which is not fair. And, you know, if we want to get the needle moved on it, I don't, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the project could be possibly favorable to the community. It's just getting it in the right manner. And everything, you know, the community concerns addressed, our concerns addressed, but this is a very hard forum to do that.
I understand. We're just doing our best to try to work within the confines of the law.
For
So,
sure. And we appreciate that. I just don't want to get back to a public hearing and we're making comments and then we're back to ground zero again and we haven't really gone anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's really tough because what I'd like to see at workshop is specific recommendations from y'all again. So hopefully we can adopt those, but that's going to be pretty impossible if we can't comment. But you're going to need 30 days for a public hearing, right?
15 days.
15 days. And that with the December 12th time limit, you're just, you know, holidays.
So what was the definitive nature of the date? Was it just to keep it moving or was it?
Council wanted it back before the end of the year, and that's their last council meeting prior to the end of the year.
What they want is a report, though, right?
That's right,
We
but
don't
you'll have to have a
necessarily-
public hearing before that. and
Before report.
Do we necessarily have to give them a recommendation at that
Yes.
time? Or can we not just give them a report and say, this is where we are?
We are the
We need more
opinion
time.
that you need a recommendation.
I mean, the unfortunate part to that is that it's putting a time frame on something that maybe needs a little more time to get done properly. And to get done to the satisfaction of this commission, the community, the developer. I mean, it's obviously you've been at this for a while, so and maybe you appreciate the time limit. I don't know. But I do think we need another workshop. And if there's any
Sure.
if there's any way we can make that in a sense of more of a I mean, I go back to my DRB days of informal review, which I know the code doesn't really allow us to do that right now as a planning commission. So I don't know what that looks like for us as a commission. But short of just going to a public hearing, I mean, another one of these workshops is not going to do us any good. So if it's just this again, I don't think we should do that.
So it's already scheduled for November 29th, right? Assuming we gave public notice in the next few days, we should be able to have another meeting.
We
Public
can
hearing.
call a workshop with 24 hours notice.
Right,
So-
but if we wanted to have a public hearing where we could discuss our thoughts more before November 29th,
Oh, you have to have 15 days public notice.
and so we should be able to fit that in as well.
If you wanted
Although
to do it
again,
that way, we could do it that way.
Thanksgiving's going to be tough, and so I'm just looking at the calendar.
Where you could take public comment, is that what you're saying,
And
Derek?
we could
Yes.
comment.
And we could comment
So you're talking,
prior to the November 29th.
so even if today was 15, you're talking Wednesday, the 16th, maybe Thursday or Friday, the 17th or 18th. The next week is Thanksgiving.
Don't we have a
but-
planning commission meeting on the
Planning is already on the
17th?
We have it on the 17th. We could
We
look at
amend
an
the-
option of adding this to the agenda for the 17th, if you wanted to do that, and do a public hearing there, and then keep our meeting on the 29th, and also have a second public hearing. That is an option.
And how would that work? You have a planning, you have a public hearing, and then we can ask questions, but we don't vote on anything.
You don't have to. You could ask him to, he would have to be willing to defer it to the special called meeting. Y'all
Okay.
have to do a couple of things. If you have a public hearing on the 17th, you either have to approve it with condition, approve it with change, or approve it with comments, or make a recommendation of denial unless the applicant were willing to defer to a date certain, which if you've already established that you were going to have a meeting on November 29th, you could ask him to do that. It would allow you to take public comment at that time.
I
That
think
sounds
if,
ideal.
I think if we've got the time to do that, Shannon, I think that would be, I mean,
Well, we're going to have to see if we can get it in the newspaper. That'll be our holdup, is whether we can meet the newspaper deadline by the 17th, for the 17th.
17th.
And how does the November agenda look now?
Not bad.
When she says not bad, what does that really mean?
Not as bad as some of the ones I've been through lately, so let's put it that way.
Okay, that's fair.
Personally, I think I'm willing. If it can't be done by the 17th, I think we could.
Well, let us
drop
see too. I
Tuesday,
mean, there may
Thanksgiving.
be a way we can have a more, I mean, I hear you on the format. Just know
Yeah,
we're
I
doing our
know.
best.
I know.
We really are doing our best here. And we're trying to navigate this process the best we can. And if there's a way that we can do it, we're just gonna have to look at our options.
Sure.
So you had threw out the idea of a design charrette. What were you trying to accomplish?
The neighborhood had mentioned at the city council meeting that they wanted it, and I wanted to make sure that we're trying to do our best to respond to everything that we are hearing.
I mean, the positive is that we've heard a lot of that as well already. I mean, I think hearing it, even if it's not gonna work, because if it's not on the 17th, it doesn't. I was trying to get one more pass at the public here, like, instead of having to go through a charrette process.
Do a public workshop and then do a charrette to see if people are responsive to the changes. That's something I'll have to work on with legal after this meeting to see what our options are.
Okay. I'd hate to have that commenting back on the same thing they've already commented on. Like,
Right.
I'd like to have some movement on
I
even
think they probably
commenting
will.
back on this, you know.
Well, I don't want to speak for anyone, but that's
Right.
probably a good way to at least try to get some things out into the public realm to see how they feel about it.
Right.
So Madam Chairman, on the public workshop, we've talked about, you've said you wanted to ask, you'd be able to ask some questions that you can't ask to here, correct?
It's more.
I think it's more about the deliberation, where y'all can go back and forth with each other and deliberate on what you would like to see changed or not changed.
So without him answering a question, can I hear a question from the chairman as to what she'd like to ask so I can understand? I just want an example. I'm trying to figure out next steps because if
I think it's more that some of us want to say, all right, I'm down with this if you do this.
We can't, that's deliberation though.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. That's what we're
Right.
looking
I mean,
to do at the next meeting.
For us to come back and just get more public comment, hear him talk more about this, it doesn't move the needle for me. I need to be able to say, that scale is too much and that's got to go from 4 stories to 3.
That's what we're,
I'm making that up.
that's what we're looking to do.
That's what we're trying.
That's what we're trying to get to.
I just don't want more talky. Put that next to funky.
Talky, funky, cool.
We hear you.
All right. I'm looking to y'all to get creative here. You guys know the process.
Is December 12th just in concrete?
It is as of right now, because that was the charge that I was given by city council. I mean, that was part of the motion.
I mean, I think that's doable. I mean, I think we want to talk so that we can talk again on the 29th, but I don't mind coming back the week of Thanksgiving. Or Tuesday, and that should give us plenty of time. If we can't do the 17th, that'd be preferred, I think.
You mean have another one of these?
No, it's a
see,
actual public
Bona
hearing.
fide-
Yes, I don't want to do this again. Do what?
We can have covered this
A
supper for
Thanksgiving dinner?
Thanksgiving
They've
dinner.
been feeding us.
I know. Yes, you may go. to
Yeah,
the
but I do think probably Monday, Tuesday, week of Thanksgiving is probably about it. If not 17th, hopefully the 17th.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
it-
whatever we can do to get a public hearing where we can get proper public comment and be able to actually discuss a little bit prior to, I do think keeping the one on the calendar for late November will that'll be kind of a safeguard to getting this report back to council by the 12th. Well, I think we're gonna add one. We're adding one though, is what the conversation is.
Can't fit in another public hearing before the 29th. Could we move the 29th meeting a week further into?
We could do the
December?
29th and defer and do something in December.
That's my.
Isn't there a report, like you have to have it, there's a deadline for the December 12th report though for.
Yeah, we'll
council.
have to get it to city council that week. They had to, it has to be included in their agenda packet.
And
which
they
goes
do it a
out-
week before.
Not quite, but it would be preferable to have it a week before.
Yeah.
So the newspaper can't accommodate our need for an ad, but we can work with, there's another newspaper that we can use. I know we've come up against this once before, Mary Douglas somewhere over here. But we'll see what we can do to make the 17th work, and if not, we'll be back in touch with you on other options.
I know y'all are working hard to make
Yeah.
this work. It's hard and it's, the tools in the toolbox aren't the best, so we get
Done a
it and we
great job.
appreciate it.
Can I say something, next time when we meet, if there's, I see what the city council wants us to focus on. If we know that there is, afterward, we're talking through, like this session right here, we have a better understanding of what those items are, and not necessarily just focus on particular ones that have more concern, because the biggest concern is the mass and density.
Well,
He's always explaining connectivity in terms of surrounding communities and some other things, and I know we can't just like pinpoint some things, but it seems like if we're meeting, like Jeff said, we're meeting and we're talking, if some of those things like mass and scale are combined so that we're not all over the place and we're having some more clear outcomes, if that makes any sense. After the workshop.
I mean, I think unfortunately they're all, being an emotion like that, it makes them all equal. And we have to address each of them, I would assume, with some regard and some distinct.
Yeah, and it can be,
Movement.
if you're not worried about the actual number of units and you're more worried about mass and scale, then you just need to say that. Like the density, okay, we're okay with, or the open space or whatever, if they're specific, what I continue to think I hear is your number one concern is the mass and the scale, and possibly the height of the buildings. And so if there's other things that you're not as, I think you just say, we're not as concerned by that issue and we're going to move on to the next issue.
I think each one just has to be addressed, whether
That's
it's
right.
in
It
the
just has to
negative or the
say-
positive.
That's right. Density, we're okay or not okay, move on. And then the next one would be mass, but
Would it be helpful to have a slide with like those items bullet pointed so you can tick through
Take down
them?
them.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can do
Yeah,
that. That's
yeah.
easy enough.
And again, if we can get the motions along with the applicant's new packet,
Or just this entire PowerPoint?
yeah, that'd be fine too.
Is there a view from Seco and Smith Street looking up towards Pendleton on your new renderings? Coming from the old house?
Oops. There are two, yes. Was one.
You don't have to show them now. I just wanted to, like, when they submit them to us, we're able to see them from, similar to what you submitted before, that they have the same views. From,
One shows from Smith looking down, pretty much down the corridor of that, and the other is more angled at looking down Seco, to your point, of the Pocket Park. Doesn't go all the way to Pendleton, but fairly far down the building. And staff has those high-res images that weren't in this packet, but that I showed you on the board, so they already have those in their possession.
Going to have equal time for Carolina to be in the presentation?
Never.
As long as Austin's in charge.
Just the only thing I saw on that list, traffic. Does the staff have anything else about traffic? I mean, I think we heard enough.
They did a traffic impact analysis and it deemed that no mitigations were required.
Okay.
And that was reviewed by DOT as well.
It was.
how far along are we with codes? Somewhere close to codes at all?
So the new code is still being drafted, but this project, even if the new code comes out while this is before, you're still applying the code as it currently exists because of when the application was submitted.
All right. I have a task
Okay,
ahead of us.
we'll do our best to see what we can do about the public notice and public hearing and comment and format. And we will let you all and everyone in the community know as well. So we'll make sure that everyone has full transparency on our next steps once we know how we're going to be able to proceed. The first thing is seeing what we have to do. Would you, if you could have let me ask this one final question. If you could have a workshop in the format of which you desire, but you can't take public comment, and because of just what we're up against with the notification deadline, would you still be willing to have that workshop between now and the 29th?
We can have a workshop where we can express what we think.
Yes, but you couldn't
Exactly.
take public comment because,
Yes.
of what we're dealing with trying to get it to the paper, get it noticed.
No, I think,
Yeah.
in fact, I
Yes.
think one public hearing, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a lot. So I think your suggestion would be good if we can do that.
Okay, if not, we're gonna work on trying to get it on the 17th so that the public can comment and we can have I would like for the public to be able to comment. I think that's good transparency in the process. But if we can't, I'm just trying to come up with what our other options are.
And they're making comment based on the new renderings, correct?
They would make comment based on,
Changes.
yes, we would be able to add the changes. What got sent down from city council is what. And if you want to modify it at the hearing, you can do that. Let us work on trying to come up with.
You're on the fly.
But I mean, instead of trying to answer that question on the fly, if you don't mind, let Logan and I have conversations about that and we'll submit it to you in the form of a legal memo.
Okay.
Yeah, because what would be nice is if we were making comment based on what the applicant showed today, because I do think that has addressed some of the issues that were put on the table. So having that as part of the discussion, I think would be important if we can.
Right, I just want to clarify, I wasn't at the council meeting, so what exactly has come before, and we want to make sure, I want to make sure it's understood. Shannon knows exactly what she's doing, and I want to make sure I'm clear before I tell her something that's not
Okay,
correct.
got it. Cool.
Can I just, in my little brain, you're going to try to get this on the agenda for the 17th. And if that doesn't work, you're going to do the best that you can to have some sort of a meeting where we can deliberate within the confines of legal
Yes,
boundaries.
yes.
All right. Ready, good? Cool. All right, we'll adjourn. Thank you.
Thank y'all over there on the other side of the room. Shannon especially, thank you. Hope you didn't feel like
No.
we're beating you up.
Beat you up.
Welcome. You're welcome.